encouragement they deserve. So, on the count of 3, let me hear your loudest round of applause. 1, 2, 3! Perfect. But we don't want to clap for the serpent and the trolls because they're naughty and they smell bad. Why don't we give them a great big boo? Don't worry, that means you're doing a good job of being bad. Well, we're not going to start off with the troll and the serpent, at least not yet. We're going to start off with this blue thing in the middle of the carpet. Can anyone guess what the blue thing is? A lake? Yes, you got it. It's no ordinary lake. It is filled with crystal clear, pure water. And when you drink the water from this lake, it makes you feel warm and happy inside. Now, as you can imagine, all the creatures in the kingdom love the lake. Why, it helps the princesses cast spells. Princesses, why don't you show us how you cast your magic spells? Oh yes, very lovely. It also helps those knights grow big and strong. Yeah, why don't you flex your muscles, knights? Yeah, those are some pretty ferocious looking muscles. They're pretty ripped. And it helps our villagers grow gigantic food. And I do believe this is the tallest turtle I've ever seen. However, there is one creature in our story who does not like the lake. Do you know who that is? The serpent. He despises the lake because as long as it's here, nobody will want to drink his poison and turn into a troll. And that is where our story begins. The serpent pacing back and forth in his dungeon, scratching his head, trying to come up with a wicked plan. Back and forth he paced, he's scratching his chin, and all of a sudden, a thought struck him like a bolt of lightning. He shouted, "Aha! Trolls, gather round, I've got a terribly wicked plan." So all the trolls huddled their heads together and started whispering to each other. And the lower their heads got to the ground, the more wicked their plan became. Lower and lower and lower they got, and they were practically lying on the dungeon floor. That's when they jumped to their feet and let out a wicked laugh. And then, that night, under the cover of darkness, the serpent and his minions tiptoed down to the lake. They knelt down by the water's edge. The serpent had 2 large fangs that he stuck out into the water and began pumping it full of poison. The trolls stirred the poison in with their swords as the lake began to bubble and boil and roil and churn, and it was no longer crystal clear, pure water, but ugly, dark, polluted water. The serpent and his minions jumped to their feet and let out a howl. So did that guy. And then they did a silly dance all the way back to their dungeon. What do you want to do for them, ladies and gentlemen? Boo. Boo. Now, the very next morning, the animals woke up. They all yawned and stretched and came skipping down to the lake to have their morning drink. We had a turtle, and the turtle had a pet bear, it seems, and skunk, and villagers too. The villagers came down as well. They knelt down and cupped their hands, just about ready to take a sip. But suddenly, the turtle hopped up and said, "Slow down, everybody. Something smells funny." Well, they all turned and looked at the skunk. The skunk waved his paws and said, "No, it wasn't me. I says you take a closer sniff. I think it's this water, yeah?" So they leaned in close, took a great big whiff. Pinching their noses, they shouted, "Pee-hoo!" And said, "You're right, skunk, this doesn't smell like you at all. Why, this smells much worse. What could it be?" That's when the butcher/pie maker hopped up and said, "Oh, don't this smell anywhere. This smells like the serpent's poison. He caught me once and tried to make me drink it, but I was able to fight him and run away. What are we going to do with the serpent's poison our lake?" Well, that's when the other villager hopped up and said, "Follow me, everybody. We'll go tell the king." So they followed that villager into Mirkwood Forest. They had to duck down low underneath some tree branches. They had to jump over some giant logs. Woo! And for a moment, it looked as though they might be going in circles. But finally, they made their way back to the very heart of the forest. They knocked on the king's castle doors 3 times. And who should step out but the tall, the brave, the handsome King Rowan and his woodland warriors. Come on out, gentlemen. Let's hear it for the king and the knights. And the animals and villagers bowed before the king. And he said, "Oh, you don't need to bow before me. What brings you here so early in the morning?" Turtle said, "Your Highness, we've got really bad news. The serpent's poisoned our lake." The knights heard this and lifting their swords high to the air, roared with anger. Do these knights roar louder at home? Maybe? Okay, knights, guys, you gotta act like you're really, really angry. So let's try this again, ready? They lifted their swords up and roared! Can we hear you roar? Can you say roar? There we go. The king said, stop that roaring, you nincompoops. That's not going to help us. But do you know what will? You see this horn I have around my neck? This was given to me when I was a wee lad, and the unicorn taught me how to play a tune on it. If I play the tune just right in the hour of greatest need, I can summon the unicorn down to the mountain top, and she can purify the lake with just a touch of her horn. So with that, King Rowan clapped the horn to his lips and began to play. Oh dear, you're no Kenny G, are you? You might want to shake it out a bit. Yeah, let's try this again. Ready? He began to play! Ah, see, there we go. Well, all the knights and the animals and villagers went running out into the woods to look for the unicorn. They looked all the way up high in the trees, but she wasn't there. So they ran over here and looked down low underneath bushes. They looked over their right shoulders. They looked over their left shoulders. The knights were looking so hard it almost looked as though they weren't looking at all. But before they knew it, they were spinning in circles, which only made them dizzy. They stumbled back to the king, who was turning purple in the face, and he said, well, did you find her? They sadly shook their heads, no. Oh, drat, said the king. Well, if I wasn't able to summon the unicorn, I do know of some wise princesses who live atop Crystal Mountain. Perhaps they can help us. Quickly, everyone, follow me. So they followed King Rowan up the side of Crystal Mountain. They had to lift their legs up high, reach up and grab onto the rocks, pull themselves up the mountainside. Higher and higher and higher they climbed. But you see, Crystal Mountain goes by another name. That is the slippery slope. How they started sliding all over the place the higher they climbed. They slid all the way to the right. They slipped all the way to the left. They started sliding backwards that way, back, till they were teetering on the edge of a giant cliff. And they screamed for their lives! And that is when that little, the green villager, he pointed his pickle and said, wait a minute, everybody, why don't we just take the stairs? Everyone bopped themselves on the head and followed the green villager up the side of the mountain. By now, they'd been traveling for 3 whole days with nothing to drink. Their tongues hung out of their mouths, their knees wobbled, and one by one, they collapsed right there on the top of the mountain, unable to go any further. It looks like this is it, the end of our story, with everybody dying of thirst. Except for that one knight who liked to die standing up, and that little boy in the blue shirt. Luckily for them, the little boy in the blue shirt saved the day. He ran up the side of the mountain and he ran away. No, you have to say, he blew me a kiss. What? What was that? All right, yeah. He knocked on the princess's palace doors. The princesses came out, they looked out down the mountain, and when they saw everybody dying, they went running down with their magic wands. They started to gently touch everybody on the head with their magic wands, and as soon as everyone's head was touched, their mouth was filled with a great big gulp of fresh spring water. By using your imagination, you might even be able to feel some of that water. They jumped to their feet and cheered, huzzah! And then, Queen Nimray came to the center. She lifted her wand and said, now somebody tell me why you're all dying on the side of my mountain. The knights knelt down before the queen. Maybe they just stood there staring awkwardly and said, Your Highness, we have terrible news. The serpents poisoned our lake. When the princesses heard this, they were so frightened that they screamed! And the queen waved her wand and said, calm down, my dears. But when I was a wee lass, the unicorn taught me how to whistle the tune. She says if I whistle it just right, I can summon her from the mountaintop. So Queen Nimray took a deep breath, puckered up her lips, stood on her tippy toes, and began to whistle. Everybody went running down the mountainside to look for the unicorn. They ran all the way over to the north. but she wasn't there. So they ran all the way over to the south. She wasn't there either. Then they ran to the east. Then they ran to the west. They went north by southeast. They went east by northwest. They went north south by east west, which isn't much of a direction at all. They looked in front of the person behind them. They looked behind the person in front of them. They even looked down behind them through their legs. And finally, they started running in circles, calling out, "Unicorn! Where are you?" But the unicorn was nowhere to be seen. They gathered back to the center with the queen. Their heads hung low. They started to sniffle because they thought they were going to cry. But the princesses all lifted their wands, and together they said, "Do not despair." For perhaps the unicorn is down at the lake right now, purifying the water as we speak. We must go down to meet her, for that is our only hope. Wearily, they followed the princesses down Crystal Mountain into a very dark and ancient place known as the Enchanted Forest. The princesses had to hold their wands high to light the way for everyone to see. Now, the trees in the forest are usually quite friendly, but they had been drinking the serpent's poison up from the lake, which made them grow dark and wicked. And the trees started throwing thorns on the ground. Everyone had to tiptoe very carefully over those thorns. And once in a while, they'd step on a sharp spike and jump 6 feet in the air. Don't forget to say, "Ouch! Oh, my tootsies! Ow!" By now, they were too tired to hop. All they could do was drag their legs on the ground, bent over, wilting like flowers. They didn't think they were going to make it out of the woods. But finally, they burst through the line of trees, and they saw their lake. There was nothing but a dark, polluted puddle. They collapsed by the water's edge and were so sad, they all began to cry. Big loud sobs, let it all out, everybody. Turtle made sure she got a picture, you know, just in case they all died. You know, she wanted somebody to find her. Well, anyway, everyone was miserable in the kingdom that day, except the serpent. He actually thought this was funny. He said, "Trolls, trolls, look, my wicked plan has worked. Yes, why, they're all down there, too weak to fight. All we have to do is dunk their heads in the poison long enough for them to drink it, and the whole kingdom will become trolls like you." So the serpent and his minions tiptoed around the lake over to the other side. They crouched down low in the tall grass. But the serpent had made a terrible mistake, for he had crouched behind ragweed. And if there's one thing that makes a troll sneeze, it's ragweed. They started sneezing up a storm. When the king noticed he was getting sneezed on, he stood up and pointed his sword. He said, "Hark, do you hear that bush over there? That bush is sneezing. I don't think that's a sneezing bush. I think that's an ambush." Because it's a... Oh, never mind. Anyway, quickly, everyone run to the other side of the lake. And so the king and all the good heroes went running all the way over here. Except for you, serpent and trolls. You want to crouch down, yes? You're still hiding. The king and his knights lined up shoulder to shoulder, side by side, in a battle formation. The princesses lined up side to side, right behind the king. And so, the king instructed his warriors. He said, "Knights, get down on your hands and knees, start crawling towards those sneezing bushes." So the knights started to crawl along towards the sneezing bushes. Slowly, but surely, the knights crawled towards the bushes. Ah, there we go. The trolls put their fingers under their noses to hold in their sneezes. Their lungs started filling up with air. Bigger and bigger and bigger they grew until they thought their lungs were going to burst. That's when the trolls and the rest of the audience let out the biggest sneeze you ever heard. The knights were blown right over onto their backs, with their arms and legs wiggling in the air, covered in troll boogers. The serpent and the trolls jumped out from behind the bush. They ran forward, lifted their swords high up above their heads, about to attack. But the princesses were too quick. The princesses jumped up, pointed their wands at the serpent and the troll, and they began to wiggle those wands. Why, gold light shot out, and the serpent and the troll started shrinking, smaller and smaller and smaller, until they looked like Daniel and Lance. You don't want to tickle them, though, princesses. I'm going to go right back over there. But anyway, the where was I? Oh, the knights got back up to their feet, and they looked around confused, scratching their heads. They said, princesses, where did those trolls go? We think you made them a little too small. How are we going to fight something we can't see? Can we make them a bit bigger? So the princesses wiggled their wands again, but were so tired and thirsty, their spell grew out of control. The serpent and the trolls grew taller and taller till they were taller than trees, and a great slow motion battle began. Eventually, it's starting. And so, steel clashed against steel. Sparks illuminated the inky black water of the once beautiful lake. While the butcher went down into the battlefield with his fighting sausage, his kielbasa. That's what you call a fighting sausage. And anyway, while these trolls are getting coupled with pies, and the snow pea farmer, he ran down and he started sacking the trolls with snow peas. He said, "Take that, you slimy troll!" But unfortunately, even with the princesses wiggling their wands to cast spells, and the turtle documenting the whole ordeal, nothing would work. When the skunk even turned around and did what skunks do best. The trolls were already stinky, so it had no effect. Our heroes were much too tired. These trolls were much too tall. The trolls knocked the swords out of the knights' hands. The knights fell to their knees and lifted their shields high above their heads, preparing for the final blow. And the trolls saw something they had never seen in the knights' shields: their own reflections. The trolls thought they were wicked, gorgeous, and now they saw they were just plain wicked, ugly. And the trolls screamed. They ran back to their dungeons where they dug under their beds and cried, "Mommy!" They were so upset they forgot where their dungeon was. This made the serpent furious. The serpent dropped his sword and shield to the ground, stuck out his fingers, and shot lightning throughout the land. Everybody was instantly hypnotized. Their eyes grew wide as saucers. Their arms stuck out in front of them like they were sleepwalking. And as though they were zombies, they stumbled over to the lake. And the serpent had enchanted his poison to look like clean water. They knelt down and cupped their hands, preparing to take a drink. When all of a sudden, Queen Nimbre snapped out of it. The queen hopped up and said, "Wait a minute, I just realized I've been whistling my tune wrong this entire time. I remember how it goes now." So she whistled like she had never whistled before. "Take it away, Queen." Everybody threw the poison back into the lake, which made the serpent even angrier. Now, pink lightning shot from his fingertips, making the lake look like it was filled with pink lemonade. Everybody loved pink lemonade. They leaned in close, they cut their hands again, opened their mouths about to drink, when the king stood up. He said, "Hold on, everybody, I do believe I remember my part of the tune." And so he blasted away on his horn. They threw the poison back once more, and by now, the serpent was flaming mad. Red bolts of lightning shot from his fingertips, making the lake look like it was filled with pomegranate juice. Nobody could resist the allure of so many antioxidants. They leaned in close, their noses about to touch the poison, their mouths open wide. As the music of the king and queen combined, a mysterious wind whisked it away. Higher and higher and higher it flew to the highest mountain peak in all of Little Earth. And there at last, in the hour of greatest need, the unicorn did hear the music. She stopped to see everyone about to drink the poison, and in a flash stood between the serpent and the lake. The serpent unleashed his most powerful magic. Blazing bolts of fire shot from his fingertips, forcing the unicorn backwards until her back hoof was about to touch the poison. But she refused to yield any further, and in a rage the serpent lunged towards the unicorn to shove her in, but pierced himself upon her horn and fell wearily. I'm sorry, you died. You can sit down if you... never mind. And so the unicorn touched her horn to the water. It was instantly transformed. No longer ugly, dark, and polluted water, but crystal, clear, pure water once again! This is happy. Everybody dipped their hands into that cool, refreshing water and took a sip. And they thought to themselves it tasted even better than before. Well, they all felt so wonderful. They stood up and took one giant jump back from the lake. But when they looked over their shoulders, who did they see? The trolls. The trolls were standing there looking very jealous. The trolls said, excuse us, we are wondering if we can have some of that water too. We're tired of drinking this bottled poison. Yeah. It's got all these chemicals in it and everything. We read about it in the magazine. But yes, can we have some of your water? What do you think? Should we let the trolls have some water? A resounding yes. The trolls came running down to the lake, where they too cupped their hands and took a sip. And as the magic waters washed over their tongues, they peeled back their helmets and revealed that they were no longer trolls, but the most adorable creatures you've ever seen! And as one last gift from the unicorn, down from the sky came the most beautiful, mystical, magical, Enya-inspired polka! They began jumping up and down and twirling round and round. They were clapping their hands and stamping their feet, having a jolly good time. Huzzah! Well, they froze. Because who was crawling towards the lake, or posing for a magazine cover? It was a serpent. He was crawling along and he said, "This water, does it heal wounds too?" He jumped into the lake, body and all, and started splashing about. The scales melted right off of his back, and his serpentine head fell off into the water. When he jumped out in the lake, you can take that off if you'd like, yes. Yeah, you got it. When he jumped out of the lake, he was no longer a snake, but the most handsome chap you've ever seen! And that's when the serpent was reunited with his long-lost princess daughter! She said, "Oh, Daddy, it's so good to see you. I wonder what happened after you fell into the well so many years ago." But the serpent said, "Oh, I'm so sorry, everybody. Is there anything I can do to apologize for being so wicked?" They all scratched their chins a moment. They looked at each other and smiled. Then they looked at the serpent and smiled even bigger. They nodded their heads yes. "Serpent, you can teach us your silly serpent dance." And so the serpent taught everybody to dance that day. They were wiggling their booties, and they were also wiggling their arms. That's a very interesting dance you got there, serpent. While everyone started making up their own silly dances. And they danced this way for not one, not two, but 3 whole months. I'll see you at the end of winter, everybody. Has it been 3 months yet? I don't think so. Keep dancing, keep dancing. And finally, at the end of their celebration, they all gathered around the lake, lifted their hands up to the sky, and let out the loudest cheer Knoebels has ever heard! And the strangest thing of all, they turned to face their audience and took a bow to thunderous applause. Ladies and gentlemen,